33. Rude under attack. In a warehouse in Sector 8 of Midgar, Rude was working on the Unit 2 chopper. He was wedged under the machine's belly, replacing the starter motor he'd dismantled and repaired, all the while keeping an eye on the entrance. The doors were open just enough for one person to fit through. Someone had listened in on the Turks' conversation. Rude had been wondering if the eavesdropper would come back. If he or she did, well, leaving himself apparently defenseless was part of Rude's trap. There was a metallic crash, the junk parts he'd left scattered by the entrance. There you are, Rude thought, listening carefully. Silence again. Come on, if you're gonna try something, do it. He put down his tool and crawled out from under the helicopter to stretch, then strode silently toward the door. No one was there. He stepped outside and peered at the warehouse complex, bright under the noonday sun, or so he assumed through his shades. He observed the surroundings, moving only his eyes, and caught a glimpse of motion to his right, and an object arcing towards him. He knew immediately what it was, a stick of dynamite, the kind used in construction, and the fuse was lit. He tensed up. The explosive landed a little ways away, bounced several times, and rolled to a stop at his feet. Rude held his breath, swiftly picked it up, and hurled it back the way it had come. Ah! Someone cried in alarm. But then the dynamite exploded. A cloud of dust flew by, followed by smoke. Amateur, Rude muttered as he strode into the smoke. There he found two men, sprawled face down. He knelt and grabbed the smaller one's shoulder, flipping him over. He was dead. Shock and fear frozen on his rat-like face. Rude remembered that face, but had no name to go with it. He went to check on the second man, and something crunched under his feet. He'd stepped on someone's glasses. He crouched beside the man, but in profile, the man didn't ring a bell. But when he picked up the glasses and held them up, oh, Rude knew this one. Doesn't he have a little brother with geostigma? Reno watched Doyle giving orders to the volunteers. The work had been going much faster since Doyle had joined the crew, and the monument was nearly finished now. In fact, he could probably leave the job in Doyle's hands for now and check back later. Reno figured. Now that he'd heard about the Genova recovery project, it was impossible to concentrate on the construction anyway. You're really taking us to school, Professor, Reno called. Would you stop calling me that? Doyle shook his head with a wry laugh. You've done this kind of work before, right? You really know what you're doing. I was in the Urban Development Division. No way? So you were co-workers, Reno gushed. Doyle's gaze strayed to the volunteers as he mumbled something non-committal. Yeah, you're about to tell me not to lump you in with the hoodlums and thugs, right? Many employees of the old company sought to distance themselves from the Turks. Well, to be honest, maybe my opinion of you guys is changing. Doyle looked at Reno again with a level stare. You're up to better things. Reno couldn't help averting his eyes. Unless it came from a fellow Turk, approval tended to make him uncomfortable. The monument and medicine are the only one step, you know. Just wait, I might take a while. But Shinra's gonna get off the ground again. Rise again, you hear? The general idea had been floating around in his head for some time. This was the first time he'd said it out loud. How? Doyle scowled, his thick eyebrows lowering. Reno cursed himself for his thoughtlessness. Can't tell you. Yeah, I figured. But no one is going to let a violent regime lord over them again. Not anymore. You tell your president that. Sure, I'll pass it on, if I remember. But listen, Professor. How about you keep quiet about where the president is? In fact, you don't need to tell anyone he's alive. He's not in the best shape, and he's still got plenty of enemies. We'd rather avoid trouble. And what if I do start telling? Then I guess the Turks will have more work to do. Doyle snorted. That was when Reno's phone rang. Hold on, I'm not done with you, he told Doyle before picking up. Hey partner, how's the chopper? Noticing that Doyle was listening closely, Reno turned away. Wait, what? He didn't quite understand at first what Rude was telling him. Okay, let me ask around over here. Reno hung up and looked at the former Shinra employee. So, Kyo isn't here today. Why is that? And no Fabio either? Why? What happened? Well, apparently they both turned up dead. 34. Red Beast, Blackwater. As I'd suspected, none of the fish was actually slow enough for us to catch with our hands. Plus, neither of us could actually swim, and that meant there wasn't a heck of a lot we could do in the water. We flailed around and splashed each other, but that was about it. Why did you bring a bathing suit anyway? I asked. In case we ended up in Costa del Sol. How does it look? Kyrie posed with her hands on her hips. The water lapped at her belly button. My line of sight climbed up from her belly to her chest, to her face, and then to the sky. Where was I supposed to look? Aw, you're so cute. She turned and walked further out into the water, splashing with her arms on the way. The orange stood out against the canvas of her pale back. It looks amazing, I mumbled. I could hear her humming the jingle under her breath. Costa, Costa del Sol. She was jarringly out of tune, but that made it only more endearing. Hey, Evan, maybe we could stop there on the way home. And Kyrie looked back at me and her smile vanished as she jabbed a finger at something behind me. I turned with a jump to see a bright red monster sniffing its way toward the car. I was pretty sure it had seen us too. Evan, where's the gun? Kyrie yelped, almost a shriek. I waded carefully toward the shore, trying not to startle the monster. It was like an enormous crimson dog. No, a wolf. Or maybe a lion? Either way, the end of the tail looked like it was on fire. It was looking at me now. I made it out of the water without breaking eye contact and crouched down beside the machine gun laying on top of my shirt. I reached out slowly and flicked off the safety. The monster had gone behind the car. I lifted the gun and squeezed the trigger. 3 quick bangs in succession. Wisps of white smoke indicated I'd struck the back of the car. I thought I heard someone shout, "Stop!" or something. I took my finger off the trigger and tried to figure out if anyone else was around. Did you get it? Kyrie said from behind me. At that moment, the monster sprang up onto the roof of the car. Get down, I shouted, and I squeezed the trigger again. The monster opened its mouth, showing rows of sharp fangs. I was aiming at its maw when it leapt up from the roof to the trunk lid. I swung the gun after it. Chunk, 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 chunk. Bullets punched the series of holes in the back of the car. Oh shit. The next second, the car was tossed into the air on a column of fire in thick black smoke. The shockwave hit me with a deafening roar and a blast of heat. I must have hit either the fuel tank or the canister in the trunk. I was the world's biggest idiot. Evan! Kyrie screamed. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the burning vehicle. Evan, help! Help? I turned around and saw her struggling desperately to keep her face above the water, but it hadn't been that deep. I can't touch the bottom, she cried. What was happening? I tossed aside the machine gun and plunged back into the pond. The water rose to my calves, then my thighs and waist. The deeper I went, the harder it was to run, but I leaned forward and waded forward, as fast as I could. But I wasn't getting any closer to Kyrie. In fact, she seemed to be moving further away. Moving? How? Kyrie! Her voice burbled away as she sank. The ripples were turning black. Why black? I couldn't see Kyrie in the water. I kept trying to reach her, and the black water was drifting toward me. It was nearly over my head now. Water rushed into my mouth and nose as I dove in frantically, eyes open to look for her, but everything was a murky black. A rising panic began to grip my heart. I broke through the surface. The blue sky, with its gently floating clouds, felt ironically serene. It was so easy for people to die, disappointingly so. Even Kyrie was no exception. She's still alive, damn it. Stop thinking and do something. I dove in again. Something swam past me in the water. Startled, I flailed to the surface. Go back to shore. It took me a good while to figure out that the voice belonged to the red monster. 35. Reno and Rude take to the skies. The helicopter left Edge's airspace and circled southwest toward under Junon. Fly, baby, fly, Reno crowed from the co-pilot seat. Quit yelling, Rude complained from beside him in the pilot seat. Reno always forgot about their headsets and tried to shout over the engine noise. By now, Rude doubted he would ever shed the habit, but it was so amateurish that Rude still called him on it every time. So, what did Doyle have to say? Remember when we talked to Song and Elena back in the warehouse? He was the one listening in. He figured we were up to no good, so he followed us there. And what about the other two? Doyle said he only told Fabio that there was choppers in the warehouse. Nothing else. I think he was telling the truth. So, what was Fabio after? That dumbass Throp apparently used to work in military supply. Said he could fly anything. Reno scoffed. Fabio figured he couldn't get Throp to fly a chopper out of there and go find Evan. Again with Evan? What's he got to do with it this time? Guess we better find out, huh? Under Junon had been a flourishing fishing village. In fact, it was the original Junon, but it had been stuck with the insulting under prefix ever since the fortified city was constructed over the top of it. The new steel city had disturbed the surrounding environment and made it harder and harder to bring in a catch. And the village steadily declined until it was practically a ghost town. 2 years ago, though, things changed. In the aftermath of Meteorfall, the Shinra company collapsed, and the use of Mako energy as an energy source ended. The air transport network that had been fueled by the abundant energy was grounded. For the residents of Under Junon, this was a golden opportunity. They realized people still needed to cross oceans. The village invested heavily in ships and ferries. The gil started to pour in, and the village became richer than it had ever been. Sang and Elena were sitting on the patio of a recently built Costa del Sol-style beach house. A mild afternoon breeze carried salt-scented air from the ocean. "Who's scheduled next?" asked Elena, dressed for vacation in a white sundress and straw hat. Sang was playing the part of a businessman in a three-piece suit. While the costumes hid their identities as Turks, the mismatched disguises didn't exactly help them to blend in. "You realize it's going to be the same as the last report. Genova." At a sharp look from Sang, Elena broke off, lowering her gaze. "Sorry, I mean, it could be anywhere or nowhere." For any one person, finding it all may well seem like a futile task, but there is still a non-zero chance. Either way, staying in contact with our agents and meeting regularly are essential to maintaining organizational cohesion. "But how many?" Elena glanced around and spoke in the stage whisper. "How many former Turks can we expect to help us?" In his mind, Sang saw the faces of the old Turks, his former subordinates, of those he had made contact with. A commotion interrupted his reverie. "Something's up," he cautioned Elena. He could hear angry voices from the village gates, and curious customers and employees alike were coming out of the shops. "Go and find out what." "Yes, sir." Elena leaped from her seat. Sang watched his operative go with a wry smile. Below the hem of her sundress, old scars marked her legs. Once you joined the Turks, you were in for life. Even those who tried to get out and build new lives could be summoned back with a single phone call. Maybe it was a cruel call to make, Sang thought, and he sighed. Elena was not gone long. "Some young woman almost drowned," she reported. But more interesting was the individual who brought her in. It was a canine-like monster with red fur and a flame at the tip of its... "Red 13, Sang interrupted. "Likely. The creature could certainly talk." He explained what happened and asked people to fetch help for the girl. "That has to be him. I'll take a look." "He left already. The girl, I mean." "Oh, she's at the clinic," said Elena, further into the village by the... "I know where it is." Sang stood and promptly left. The white wooden building stood beside the sturdy steel supports that held up the city of Junon above. It was recently repainted. By the look of it, it seemed more like a stylish cafe than a medical office. The waiting room immediately inside the door was big enough for about 20 people, with 4 comfortable-looking couches. Sang was about to address the receptionist when he noticed a young woman in orange bathing suit lying on one of the couches. She seemed to be in some pain, and her eyebrows were tightly drawn. A leather jacket embroidered with a bomb was on the floor beside her. Sang picked it up and covered her with it. And as he did, he got a better look at her face. He knew this girl. She was the one on the veranda when the explosion occurred in Helan. She'd come with the president's half-brother Evan, and her name was Kyrie. "Sang, is that you?" said a male voice. "My, it's been a long time. How are you doing?" He turned to see a white-coated doctor, a man who had saved many lives in his field as a military medic, including Sang's own. The doctor was nearing 60, but hit it well. His muscular frame implied a regular lifting regimen. Decently well, Dr. Eugene, thanks to you. I'm sure my work is flawless. I'm sure my work is flawless. Do you know that girl, by the way? Sang shook his head. We'll just have to wait for her to regain consciousness. What happened? Well, she has no external injuries, said Dr. Eugene. I presume she's simply a non-swimmer who ended up out of her depth. And a red monster brought her here? I wouldn't call him a monster. That was Red 13. I would have thought you'd know that. The Shinra scientist used him for a plaything, but it appears he managed to escape back to his natural habitat. Where did he go? Sang asked. No idea, the doctor shrugged, then gave Sang a perfunctory nod, turned, and returned to his office. Like the science department, Shinra's medical corps had employed top-level talent. But why did skill and expertise always have to come at the expense of character? Sang chuckled humorously. Back at the patio, Sang sat across from Elena and folded his arms. What happened? She asked. I'm trying to piece that together. What was going on? Given the bathing suit, Kyrie had obviously intended to go into the water. Then Red 13 had saved her from drowning. Was it a mere coincidence that put her and Red in the same place? Or was there some connection between them? Kyrie was an associate of Evan Townsend. Evan was the president's half-brother. Did Red 13 and Evan somehow know each other? And was Red 13 still in contact with Cloud's bunch? What about Cloud and Evan? If the president's brother was involved in some way with their former adversaries, what did that mean for the Turks? Red and Kyrie's meeting could have simply been happenstance, but experience had taught Sang that a series of coincidences only added to something more. He couldn't afford to ignore this. It was sensitive time, with the research for Genova just getting underway. Why were these connections appearing now? Why had Kyrie ended up in the same place as Elena and him? Reno made a phone call as Rude examined the charred shell of Evan's car. Looks like he shot at it. Rude looked toward the dark, murky pond. There was an automatic rifle down there on the bank. He must have fired from that way. Why the hell would he shoot his own car? Said Reno. And where'd he get an automatic? Oh, hey, Chief, it's me. So, we went after Evan in the chopper. You did what? Elena noticed the hint of frown on Sang's face. A rare show of emotion from their unflappable commander. This had to be serious, she thought, straining to hear Reno's voice in the earpiece of Sang's phone. Fabio's dead. Car blew up. I see. You two come meet us here. If you find Evan on the way, bring him in too. Sang snapped the phone shut and looked at Elena. Sir, she said. Did you have any other plain clothes? I have one more outfit like this back in the helicopter. I'll need to borrow it. Meet me in there. Meet me in half an hour. Sang mulled over Reno's report as he walked through the village. Fabio, the medicine thief from Helan, and some friend of his had tried to steal a helicopter and gotten themselves killed. It seemed Evan was somehow involved. Arriving at the clinic, Sang pushed the door open for the second time that day, but this time, Kyrie was not in the waiting room. Doctor, he called toward the exam room. Dr. Eugene reluctantly stepped out, a dumbbell in each hand, and a sheen of sweat on his forehead. Where's the girl who was here? Asked Sang. You mean she's gone? I suppose she ran off without paying, I might add. Not that she could have had any money on her in that state anyway. What did you do for her? Examined her injuries, by palpitation mostly. The doctor's shoulders shook with a sleazy laugh. Sang produced a money clip from his pocket and tossed a few notes on the sofa. Here. Why are you paying the bills for a girl you don't know? I've taken a liking to her. That should cover your expenses, and a little extra for your discretion. We were never here. Good luck, Dr. Eugene smirked. Sang ignored him and made his exit. No sign of Kyrie outside. But just as he began walking away, he heard a young woman's voice from behind the building. Where have you been all this time? Was it her? Oh, you know, a young man answered, wandering. Sang slid silently around the side of the building, inching as close to the corner as he dared, with his back against the wall. He couldn't see either of them, but could listen in. I thought you died in that fire. Only the good die young, so here I am. Well, I've gone straight, so I'm probably not long for this world. You have? Because of that Evan kid? Thanks to Evan. How do you know him anyway? I know everything about you, Kyrie. So it was Kyrie, but who was the boy? Sang needed to see him. He stepped around the corner to reveal himself. Kyrie was there, a dubious expression on her face, wearing her jacket over the bathing suit, and a pair of slippers from the doctor's office. Opposite her was a teenage boy with silver hair, a well-structured face, and Sang immediately felt his heart rate increase. He bore far too strong a resemblance to that infamous Shinra Company creation. Maybe it was just the silver hair, Sang tried to tell himself. But the piercing eyes, too, called him to mind. A man once hailed as a hero who later tried to destroy the world. The memory of facing Sephiroth and all his fury came rushing back. Being cut down, left for dead. It was all the Turk could do to stop his limbs from trembling as he looked at the boy in the eye. "Who's this?" said the boy. "I don't know. No, wait," Kyrie started. "You were at Healan." Sang nodded. The boy came closer, his right hand extended. His leather riding suit creaked, apparently still new. "Hi, I'm Kazuhige, an old friend of Kyrie's." Sang stared at the proffered hand and finally reciprocated. Kazuhige's grip was firm, and chill ran all the way up Sang's arm. He withdrew quickly, sure of one thing: this boy isn't human. "It's good to meet you," the boy said, the edges of his mouth curling. "Sang of the Turks, right?" Sang had not introduced himself, and yet somehow the boy knew his name. Kyrie turned to Kazuhige with a puzzled look. "Well, I'm off," said Kazuhige. "I wouldn't hang out too much with this guy if I were you." He took a step back, and as he did, Kyrie's eyes rolled back in her head and she fainted. Sang stepped forward to catch her, and everything faded to black. Rude flew the chopper above the wheel tracks that snaked through the wild grassland below. It wasn't the most direct route under Junon, but assuming Evan was headed that way, he'd be more likely to stick to the road. "I know his style," Reno had declared, and Rude had agreed. "Reno, look." "Huh? Oh, hey." Evan was standing in the grass under them, looking up at the helicopter. Rude was surprised to feel a rush of relief. "Damn, kid," he muttered under his breath. As well as the usual shoulder bag, Evan was hauling a backpack and a pair of boots suspended around his neck by the laces. Rude flew past them and wheeled around before starting to descend. Evan began to run, staggering under his load. "What's he running for?" said Reno. "Probably because he feels guilty." Rude put the chopper down in front of Evan, blocking his escape route. "You know, partner," Reno's voice dropped, "Fabio was trying to steal a chopper for Evan. There's something about this kid." The side of his head was screaming. He must have gone down like a sack of bricks when he lost consciousness, although he doubted he'd been out for longer than a few seconds. Sang staggered to his feet and looked around. The boy who called himself Kazuhige was nowhere to be seen. Kyrie was still on the ground. He crouched beside her and patted her cheek. "Kyrie, you okay?" She weakly opened her eyes, then sat up fast when she recognized Sang. "My operatives have Evan safe," he told her. That was a lie, but not a particularly problematic one. The important thing was to secure the girl. Relief washed over her face, but then her expression stiffened. "I'm going back to the helicopter," Sang continued. "Evan will be there. You going to join us?" "Obviously." Sang nodded and started for the village gates. He heard Kyrie right behind him. "Why did I pass out?" she asked. "I'm not sure. Perhaps you're still weak from your near drowning." He did not mention his own bout of sudden unconsciousness. "You think so?" She sounded dubious. "How did I even get out here anyway? I remember being in the water, and then I blacked out." "I don't know. I only found you by sheer coincidence," said Sang. "Evan must know more, but tell me, who is this Kazuhige?" "Just a guy I know." Apparently, she didn't feel like discussing it. "Are you sure it was really him, though?" That was a question for which he needed an answer, even if he had to drag it out of her. "What do you mean?" "I overheard your conversation. You said you thought he died in a fire." "Well, sure, but obviously I was wrong. I'd know his snub nose and orange hair anywhere. You saw him, right? It's a hard face to forget." Kyrie's description was nothing like that of the boy who would grasp Sang's hand, and Sang knew why. Although he did not know this Kazuhige, he was sure of one thing: that wasn't him. Rather, it had done something to Kyrie's mind and made itself appear to her as a dead boy by that name. Sang knew of only one entity with that power. Orange hair? He repeated. Yeah, it's a tough job dyeing that color, let me tell you. He turned around to face Kyrie, but she was looking off to her side, taking to the surroundings. She didn't notice that he'd stopped, and she walked right over to him. Oh, sorry, embarrassed. Kyrie went to back away. Sang took her by the shoulders. Listen, that boy who called himself Kazuhige, he's not human. He's something else. He was by no means certain whether he should be telling her this, but it was necessary to gain her trust. He needed her to depend on the Turks. Do you know how ridiculous that sounds? She said. I do. I'd be surprised if you believed me right away. But be careful if you have any more contact with him. He might try to manipulate you. There have been cases like that before. When the dead returned, the living were lost in much greater numbers, and it was Genova's doing. Sang thought back on something he'd heard from Dr. Hojo, the head scientist of the Shinra Science Department. According to the records, Genova nearly succeeded in destroying the world in the distant past. And the interesting part is how it was a masterful trick. She deceived people by approaching them in the form of someone dear to them, parents, siblings, friends, and neighbors. The Gamut, sometimes people who had died. This was the nature of her power. And then, once she'd gained her target's favor, she would manipulate them. He hates you. She wants to kill you. She filled their heads with terror and paranoia until sooner or later, fights would break out, and they engineered their own ruin. Dr. Hojo had spent more time around Genova than anyone else in recent history. In the end, his mind appeared to crack. Perhaps it was Genova that drove him to insanity. With the terrors and paranoid delusions she had filled into his head. On the other hand, he had been a mad scientist with few principles. Was there anyone he cared enough about for Genova to use against him? Don't worry, said Sang. We will protect you. Why? Kyrie retorted. You're Evan's friend, and Evan is a person of interest to us. You know why, don't you? Spell it out for me. Sang described Evan's connection to Rufus Shinra. So you see, we're interested in Evan's safety and yours. We wondered whether his own MO was really all that different from Genova's. Is she a Turk too? Kyrie asked when she saw Elena leaning against the helicopter. Yes, her name's Elena, Sang replied. She has some clothes for you. She's the one who beat up Fabio. Yes, but that's over with now. I'll ask you not to bring it up again. Just because you've let it go doesn't mean I have to, Kyrie muttered, striding ahead of him towards Elena. She jabbed a finger into the Turk's face. You bitch! Do you even care what you did to Fabio? That wasn't me, Elena replied, coolly pushing aside Kyrie's accusatory finger. I didn't kill him. What are you talking about? Elena returned with an uh-oh look to Sang. Shaking his head, he stepped closer. What's going on? Fabio is dead? Kyrie was standing rigid, fists clenched like a child about to have a tantrum. You bastards killed him, is that it? It was an unfortunate accident. It was not our intention. Before Sang could finish, Kyrie swung her fist at him. He caught her slender arm with a firm grasp. We wouldn't do anything to upset Evan. I told you that. Kyrie's lower lip trembled, but she said nothing. Speaking of which, Reno called, said Elena. They're here with Evan. They'll be here with Evan soon. So what are these clothes? Kyrie broke her silence to ask. Her sudden change of tone vexed Sang. He didn't understand how she was processing all the things she had recently seen and heard. Indeed, he found young women difficult to read, difficult to handle. He even had problems with Elena, his subordinate. He would have to involve Evan as well. We'll make use of both him and Kyrie to get to Genova, Sang decided. He walked some distance from the women, took out his phone, and dialed a number from memory. He had told the others, too, not to keep this number as a saved contact. The recipient answered quickly. We might be closer to Genova than we thought, said Sang. Rufus Shinra only replied, I see. Do you remember the girl Kyrie? Yes, her. She met an acquaintance she believed to be dead. However, the acquaintance did not match her own description of him. No further explanation was necessary from Rufus. Yes, sir. I believe it's worth the risk, although the boy and the girl will bear most of it. I can live with that, said Rufus, then let out a short laugh. Convenient quirk of fate, isn't it? 36. The Turks are scary after all. I had no specific reason to run when the helicopter started following me, except that an unidentified aircraft bearing down on you is inherently threatening. Once I was aboard, I said thanks and gave Rude and Reno a rundown of how I ended up where they found me. Took me some doing, though, shouting over in the noise of the engine and rotor. About Kyrie, we've got word that she's safe and under Junon, was Reno's only response when I finished my story. Good, I said, then added, You mean there are more Turks in under Junon? No answer. Reno and Rude just sat there, not saying anything. I tried a couple of times to start up a conversation, hoping to figure out why they decided to clam up, but eventually Rude ordered me to shut my mouth. And so oppressive silence it was. They weren't my pals. They were the two thugs who'd broken into my own back door when this all started. Rude nodded towards something on the ground, and Reno peered downward. When I looked too, I saw Nanaki bounding across the plain with his fiery tail flying out from behind him. He stopped when we got directly above him, and then looked up. Could we land for a sec? I said. I think maybe he's headed back to help me. I should tell him I'm okay. But they ignored me and kept flying. Kyrie owed Nanaki her life. Actually, we both did. When he saw me flailing uselessly in the water, he'd ordered me to get out, and then pulled up Kyrie from the depths and dragged her all the way to shore. I didn't know CPR, but Nanaki crouched over her and pumped her chest with his front paws. She coughed up a fair amount of water and got her breath back, but then fainted again. That's strange, the water's changing. I followed his gaze, and I saw that the sparkling, limpid water was now cloud, turning into an opaque black. Sinister, don't you think? I guess so, I mumbled. I think she's out of danger, but I'm going to take her to under Junon just in case, said Nanaki. There should be a doctor there. I could only stare at him. He shook his body, then let out a menacing growl. It was a deep growl of a carnivore. I am Nanaki, and I am what you see, except what is in front of you. Because there is nothing else to explain, I have no desire to hurt humans. Still, less to feed on them. Now help me lift her onto my back. You're right, I obeyed, draping the limp Kyrie over Nanaki's back. Seeing her there in a bathing suit, her bare arms and legs dangling helplessly, made my heart sink. She will fall if I run, so I must go slowly, said Nanaki. But I will still be faster than you, I think. Once I find a doctor, I'll come back for you. So for now, head to under Junon at your own pace. Wait. I took my jacket from the shore and put it over Kyrie, tying the sleeves around her waist. At least she's partly covered now, I thought. See you soon, said Nanaki. Take care of her. He nodded and then took a few careful steps before accelerating to a gentle lope. A little ways off, he stopped and looked back at me. About before, I was only trying to see if you had a phone. I'm sorry I startled you. I should have spoken to you first. He sounded genuinely apologetic. Like a dog, Nanaki sat down on his hindquarters and cocked his head up at the helicopter. I'm sorry, and thanks. It was my fault for forgetting the laws of the wild, I told him in my mind, face pressed against the window. At last, the enormous steel fortress I knew only from TV came into sight. Junon, some of the silhouettes in the skyline were office buildings, smaller-scale versions of Midgar's Shinra building. But for the most part, the facilities were clearly military. Even now, post-meteor fall, it projected a menacing face of any approaching enemies. Hard to believe that under Junon was somewhere beneath all that. As we got close, the helicopter changed course away from Junon and approached a small harbor. As we landed, I could see a girl in a white dress and leather jacket over her shoulders waving at me. Kyrie, I felt my chest go tight. I'm glad you're okay. Evan, Kyrie rushed me as I disembarked and wrapped her arms around me. I'm sorry, I really messed up back there, I said, holding her close. Don't be. Her muffled voice came from somewhere around my breastbone. We're okay now. Yeah, I could feel the adventure coming to an end. I didn't need to know about my mom anymore. It was enough to have Kyrie safe with me. What else could I want? I longed to tell her so. but not with words. I looked around. The Turks were clustered by the helicopter, deep in conversation, none of them watching us. Here goes nothing. I made up my mind, Kyrie. Evan, let's get out of here. On 3, we'll just run. Huh? They said Fabio's dead, she hissed. And one of them must have done it. What? I don't want to be around these guys. Let's get out of here, okay? Okay. Kyrie stood on her tiptoe and kissed me lightly on the cheek. 1, 2, 3. We broke into a sprint, or Kyrie did. I was mostly being dragged by the hand from behind. From behind us, a woman shouted, "Stop! I'll shoot!" 1, 2 seconds passed. A gunshot rang out, and something struck me hard on the shoulder. I spun in the air, hit the ground. As I sprawled there, I realized I'd been shot in the shoulder. The pain was like nothing I'd ever experienced. Kyrie held me in her arms, tearfully calling my name over and over. I could hear the woman who shot me. Elena, was it? Getting reamed out by Reno in the distance. Rude carried me on his shoulders to the clinic under Junon, and I had to bear the agony until some doctor with a creepy grin shot me up with enough anesthetic to make the pain go away. Unfortunately, I didn't actually bear it with much dignity. I was complaining and crying the whole way, but Kyrie kept telling me I was brave. Maybe I still had a chance, despite how miserably pathetic I must have looked to her. I clung to the thought until I fell asleep. After that, I just drifted in and out of consciousness with no sense of time at all. When I finally woke up for real, it was dark as well. Even so, I could tell someone was next to me. Who's there? It's me. Fabio. I heard you were in trouble, so I flew down here. You flew? I mean, I rushed here. You got shot in the shoulder? Yeah. Which one? I felt pressure on my shoulder, and a horrible blazing heat rolled outward from the wound and through my whole body. Fabio? What are you doing? I heard something break, or maybe it was a metallic creak, and then abruptly my shoulder felt lighter. Nothing. Anyway, Evan, I'm really glad you're okay. Thanks, I remembered. Fabio, Kyrie said you were dead. Suddenly I opened my eyes and everything was bright. Wait, I opened my eyes? Had they been shut all this time? Next to my head were the metal bars of the hospital bed, and above me a blank white ceiling. The lights shone with a startling brilliance. Where are they getting the power for those lights? I wondered, absently, turning my head to find the person who'd just been speaking to me. Fabio? No answer. I didn't see him. Was it just a dream? It had sure felt real. Still uncertain, I climbed out of the bed and left the small infirmary room. Then realized I was wearing nothing except a skimpy robe. I couldn't wander around like this. I went back and looked for my clothes, but at first, all I could find was something that looked like a broken piece of ceramic armor and long strips of bandages, crumpled up and discarded like a snakeskin by my bed. I eventually found the basket on the floor with my clothes in it. When I reached out to fish out my underwear, I discovered that my left arm worked fine, no pain. I couldn't feel anything wrong. Had the doctor with the creepy grin operated on me? If so, it was impressive work. I dressed myself quickly, and once my bomb jacket was on, I walked out again. There was a door at the end of the narrow hall, like Dr. Drake's clinic, I thought. The door opened and Kyrie appeared in her usual sleeveless leather jacket and shorts and boots. She must have retrieved our stuff from the burnt-out car. She'd look good in a dress, too. But this was the Kyrie I knew. Evan, she exclaimed. What are you doing? Where's your cast? I realized the stuff on the floor must have been from a cast. It came off. Shoulder feels fine. That was the plain truth. I moved my arm in circles to prove it. That makes no sense. You were in surgery for 5 hours. It's only been 2 days and... She trailed off, looking down as if she had something that she didn't want to say. And, I prompted, the doctor said your arm might never work right again. My shoulder permanently damaged? It was hard to imagine. But it doesn't hurt at all, I told her. That must be the drugs. You should go back to bed at least. Don't move too much around. At Kyrie's urging, I started back toward the little room. I was just talking to Fabio. Huh? Although I guess it might have been a dream. I sat down on the bed. To my right, Kyrie shook her head. They told me Fabio died. Said he and Kyo were messing around with the bomb. Who said? Reno. He didn't need to lie to us like that. I said. I wish it was a lie. Her shoulders seemed to tremble along with the quivering of her voice. I stretched out my arm and drew her close. What could Fabio have been doing? What were he and Kyo doing with a bomb? Then I thought of Fabio and Bits, the brothers' pact. They wanted to kill Rufus Shinra. Had Fabio been preparing to actually do it? Explosives were Kyo's thing. I couldn't think of any other reason for Fabio to be around a bomb. What does the reason matter anyway? Fabio's dead. I hope Bits is okay, said Kyrie. We should go back to Edge. What about Nibelheim? Don't you want to look for your mom? I can look for her later, if she's alive. If she's alive. But Fabio wasn't. We would never see him again. Behind his green clothes, his glasses, and his unassuming stoutness was a will 100 times stronger than mine. My eyes burned, and my nose ran. Suddenly tears started spilling down my cheeks, and Kyrie clung to me and cried as well.